Welcome in Athens and the Democracy Forum, Hélène and Stathis. I hear you were colleagues at Yale, but you told me you started out in Yale in 2009. And I was thinking 2009 was the year, I think, Facebook became big. So we all thought in the beginning, that was a period when we all thought that we will have several Arab Springs all over the world through social media. How wrong we were, of course. My thought is, what's to say AI will be any different, Hélène?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be debating Stathis and to be in Athens. I would say that 2009 was also a year after 2008, which was one of the biggest financial crises, since the Great Depression. And I think that was the moment when only then we started realizing the damage done by globalization. I think we finally came to terms with the fact that the previous 40 years had been to the benefit of a tiny fraction of the population, the 1%, and at the expense of the working class and the middle class. So I think if we had figured that out earlier, we probably would have been less optimistic about the potential of technologies, because technologies do not have an impact independently from the economic superstructures, if you want. And I think that should have given us an inkling of what was coming. It wasn't the Arab Springs all over the place. It was going to be more concentration of power, more oligarchization of our democracies, and more manipulation of the public, unfortunately. I think I was naive too, so I'm not blaming indiscriminately. I do think we were still learning about the impact of policies that had been going on for decades. And I think we have to ask those bigger economic questions if we want to see the potential of these technologies for the better.
What about AI? Stathis, what do you think? Will it follow in the steps of the social media?
I think that's the best indicator we have. What has been the impact of internet on politics? I would say certainly it's not something that has been very positive. 2009 was also the year of the big crisis in Greece, and Greece was a bit like a laboratory case. And I remember very, very vividly how especially Twitter at the time became the sort of petri dish for all kinds of extremist ideas, not just gaining traction, but also emerging in the public debate and becoming, to use a term that's overused and not very, very helpful, legitimate. What is legitimacy? Legitimacy is the belief that something is acceptable, that is not out of bounds. And I think the very idea of things being accepted by everyone without questioning has been challenged, not necessarily by fundamental and deep changes, but by the mere belief that they can be without any negative effect. In fact, with a positive effect for those who undertake that. And I think that's very worrisome, the discovery that ideas that were considered to be marginal because people couldn't put them up front in the center of the debate, suddenly became accepted because they were no longer marginal. And that is the very worrisome thing. The idea, for example, that elections are a legitimate instrument can be challenged very easily. Who's to say that when elections were, the results were actually counted and elections were fair? Everyone can challenge that. And the moment you begin to challenge, nothing stands anymore. So you get into this great disorder situation, which is not very good for liberal democracy.
One could say, though, that AI deepens the open democracy the way you envision it in your book. Like everybody has access to information, it makes voter participation easier. What do you think?
So actually, to pick up on what Stathis was saying, I do think that one benefit of these technologies is that they brought voices on the forefront that were sort of gated out of the picture before. So I think that's how we got Black Lives Matter, that's how we got Me Too. None of that would have happened if it were not for some sort of social media effect, networks, the sort of collective consciousness arising among a generation that decided enough is enough. So that actually is a net good, if you ask me. It creates more diversity and more noise, so it's very hard to figure out where the truth is, and we don't have the gatekeepers from this, the editors of the 60s or this prior world, but we do gain something. It's just we're still figuring out how to manage all of that diversity. And I would say the same thing is happening in a way now. In Nepal, you saw Gen Z sort of ousting all these corrupt leaders. It's partly because of Discord and all these technologies. So there's a lot of bad, there's also some serious good. So how do we channel the good and eliminate the bad? That's the big question.
Stathis, we've seen that we have a problem with broligarchy. I mean, the tech leaders are all male, rich guys, mostly of the same age. Trump supporters, recently Trump supporters, because they're sucking up to Trump, trying to get a good relationship to him and have government contracts. How do you deal with that problem and the problem of diversity and access to information for everybody?
I think when it comes to this question, I think diversity is a bit of a red herring, because what corporations seek is profit. And it doesn't matter whether the leader of a corporation is going to be a man or a woman, is going to be straight or gay, they're going to seek profit. So that's one thing, and there's nothing necessarily bad about profit-seeking enterprises. But where the problem comes is that the technology that has been developed since the beginning of the internet is a technology that is extremely good at generating addiction. People become addicted, and in the process also become extremely willing to be very toxic. I remember when I started using the internet first in the very old times of the early 90s, the late 80s actually. I remember discussion lists, listservs, in which people would come together, students mostly, who had access to internet through universities, and it was very quickly they started fighting against each other. So you could see this element of toxic interaction emerging very quickly. So to go back to Hélène's point, you get perhaps more transparency, which very quickly becomes very toxic, which creates enormous disorder, which creates incentives for people to be very destructive and manipulative. And then the question is where that leads us. It leads us to a situation, eventually where the destruction is not easily managed by institutions. And the solution usually is because people eventually seek order, and they seek security and safety. It leads to a situation in which you have autocrats promising to establish this kind of order at the expense of freedom. I think that is the danger.
Also, who do you think will be in charge of regulating the AI environment? I mean, will it be the tech leaders, the owners of the platforms themselves, the users, the government, the state, the EU? Who's going to lead the way?
Predictions, it's not my forte, but I think we need some kind of global regulation, which is unlikely to come from either the US or China, which are the big players in this space, because they think they're going to win that race. So they don't want to be, tying their arms in their back. So I tend to think that it's going to come from the losers, which are right now the European Union and whoever wants to forge an alliance with them, because they do have an incentive to sort of slow down these two giants and protect the rest of humanity. So I hope we can forge some kind of coalition of the willing to start something and show by example that AI can be tamed and channeled for good and channeled for workers, the youth, and not just the profit of a few people at the top. Whether it's going to happen, I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, but I think that's the only way forward in a way. And in a way, AI is both the poison and the remedy, because this sort of global coalition at scale like that, we can't do it without that very tool. We need the LLMs, we need the social media, we need these structures. If we go through the usual sort of pen and paper, and legacy structures, it's never going to happen.
Stathis, do you believe the coalition of the willing is a realistic approach or not?
Right now, we're seeing the pendulum swing the opposite way. What we've seen since the presidential elections in the US is, in fact, a coalition between the tech industry and some sort of, whatever you call the name, populist leadership. This is not a problem for autocratic societies in which the state, like in China, has the capacity to mold the industry. And so the European Union, especially given that the European economies are facing enormous challenges right now, and also political challenges, we have elections coming up in which potentially winners may actually overturn a lot of what these values and ideas are. It's not clear to me where this kind of reaction is going to come. There seems to be some affinity between the type of interaction and public debate that in the internet or social media has been spawning and these kinds of populist leaders. I think here is an example of technology not being just epiphenomenal to underlying structures, but actually creating new realities. And eventually, the pendulum may swing in a different direction, but in between, a lot of bad things may happen. So it's not clear to me how all of this is going to play out.
I think also another problem, because we had the EU law last year, but then again, AI is moving so fast that they have to adjust the law the whole time. I just read a comment by Ursula von der Leyen today, and she said exactly that we have to move very fast, because it's a thing, we have to run to catch it. It's developing so quickly, we can't even get to it. I don't know what your take is on that.
Well, so I tend to think that external regulation is always a bit, indeed too slow and last resort and too crude. There are more ambitious approaches that I don't think anybody is really willing to consider, but we should reform corporate governance so that at the source, you empower engineers to dissent, to voice their concerns, to potentially veto the production of certain, algorithms maybe, or at least sort of have the power to express resistance or something. Right now, there's nothing, because it's all decided at the top by boards of directors who are themselves algorithm optimized for profit. So that's in the design. And for me, there's nothing new there, honestly. I mean, I know you're right, there are some epiphenomenal things, but I think fundamentally it's back to who has power. And we faced that in the globalization period, right? It was the same thing. Corporations are giant algorithms optimized for profit. We know the damage they've done. We've seen very little by way of controlling them and slowing down the process, protecting the losers, etc. So I kind of expect the same will happen with AI corporations. But if we don't touch the power inside them, and also, you need to do it at the industry level, but even just starting at the individual level, like the GAFAMs, all of them, you put a citizens' assembly on top of the structure, for example, or a council of workers or something. I think that would sort of change the dynamic and the pace. But I don't know if the US would ever allow that, because then China would, get an advantage potentially. So.
When we compare AI to globalization, I think there is a net benefit of globalization which at least allowed millions of people to escape poverty.
In China, yeah.
In the developing world. And so the losers are the losers in the developed world, of course, but we shouldn't forget the positive effect. With AI, it's not clear to me who the winners are besides the people who gain political advantage out of it, because even the sort of aggrieved people who get a kick out of venting their grievances on social media, I'm not sure that makes them happier at the end of the day, or that they get some benefit that eventually will improve their lives. So it's not clear to me where the balance lies here at all.
Right. Just to clarify, I'm not anti-globalization no more than I'm anti-AI. I think these are on net good things, but I do think there needs to be democratic control throughout, and we've barely had it.
We saw the example of OpenAI was very interesting, because the board of directors essentially fired the CEO, and we saw how that turned out, with a lot of engineers within the company actually supporting the sort of quote-unquote greedy practices of the CEO.
That is true, but that's why I think you want a sort of citizen jury that represents not just the interests of the workers, because occasionally those are also aligned with profit, but maybe larger groups of stakeholders that have at heart the interest of humanity.
And one of the most disturbing, perhaps, developments is the fact that chatbots are now becoming segmented. So chatbots are going to develop in a way in which people are going to use the chatbot that corresponds to their biases and their, narrow perceptions. And that is going to make polarization even more extreme, in which people eventually live in the same society but can no longer understand each other because their fundamental assumptions are so different. So the question for me is, who is going to profit from that? Is it going to be tech companies? Is it going to be autocratic governments? A combination of both, or perhaps the machines themselves? I don't know.
What do you think?
So this almost science fictional idea that the machines could take control, actually, if you think about it, again, sorry, I'm obsessed with this, but the corporations during the globalization phase were to be exactly like algorithms who took over the host, the local nations, and like the lobbyists of those corporations sort of like corrupted, or took control or somewhat very much shaped the policies in favor of more and more globalization, and more cheap labor imported from abroad, and outsourcing of production. It looks like the purpose of this corporation became parasitic on the democratic purpose. And so I could see that happening with AI as well, absolutely. They will convince, it will develop its own lobbies to convince government to build more and more giant data centers that are going to consume all the resources. I'm supposed to be the optimist in this conversation, by the way, so I don't know what's happening, but okay, so on the plus side, the more optimistic side, I do think that it's the first time in history that we have the capacity to tap the collective wisdom of the entire planet through these, data sensing tools, through these platforms, through the algorithms. So I think that's an amazing opportunity. If we are intentional about this, we can cure diseases. We can also set up governance structures at the global level that will help us address climate change, that will help us address poverty, inequalities, intergenerational inequities. The sky is the limit. It's just we're not taking the direction at the moment, unfortunately.
I was thinking that leftists very often come across as technophobes, and Trump, like a very ardent promoter of AI, especially in the competition with China. So I was thinking, how will we manage that the right and the alt-right won't hijack the whole AI project, and that the leftists will step in, and take their part in the whole development?
I think that the true divide right now is not between the left and the right, it's between what we may call the moderates, which represent the establishment, the status quo, people in this room, on the one hand, and the people who want to disrupt the process, who tend to be associated with the what we call the far right or the radical right. And essentially, what animates them is the willingness to challenge every fundamental idea about how liberal democracies that underline the assumptions about the operation of liberal democracies. So that is really right now, it looks like the far right is winning, and especially after the presidential elections in the United States, it seems to me that this is going to have a very big effect. Of course, if things go bad in the United States, that could create a reaction, but it seems to me the left is a bit out of the picture, and especially the social democratic left in whatever remains of it in Europe is facing eventually a problem of survival even.
Hélène?
I would zoom out of the US case. We're obsessed with the US, but there are very interesting things happening with the left in other countries. For example, in Taiwan. So Audrey Tang, who was sort of started her career as a sort of cyberpunk / hacker. She was part of the Sunflower Revolution. She forged this concept of Gov0. You create institutions that are more efficient and smarter with technology outside of government. It was so good that the product ended up being co-opted by government. She was promoted to Minister of Digital Affairs for 4 years, between 2020 and 2024. And she handled the pandemic, the government there handled the pandemic beautifully using tools, that sort of digital memes and to ensure people knew where masks were, to ensure that they trusted the vaccination protocol, to debunk all kinds of conspiracy theories. So I genuinely think that we've got the technology the political institutions create. It's bad when the political institutions are bad, and it's good when the political institutions are good. For example, this fake, what's it called, deep fakes, right? Where in Taiwan, what she did is that she created a deep fake of herself, and then she sent it to the public, explaining what a deepfake was and that she wasn't real, and that this, you're going to receive a lot of those things during the election campaign. And she calls it pre-bunking. It's debunking something, but not after the fact, ahead of the problem. And so you create this enormous literacy in the population in a fun way, in a pedagogical way. And so when the Russian bots come in or the Chinese bot come in, all of a sudden, people are immune. And this is not because they're smarter than Americans, because their government's better.
Another problem, I think, is that it's hugely energy consuming, and it's very bad for the environment. What do you think about that? How is this going to be solved? If we all run around asking ChatGPT on every little detail, where should I have breakfast today, or can you translate this? Isn't this a problem?
Not being an engineer, I cannot really say whether there are breakthroughs coming in terms of making the operation of data centers less energy thirsty. But that reminds us that besides AI, we face a very important problem, which is climate change, and it's something we're very much aware of in Greece. The idea here is to harness the advantages that AI provides in order to find solutions for these kinds of problems, but in between, we make them worse. And so the question is, what is going to be faster? Whether the results we're going to get are going to be more, easier and faster to act on the damage that is being caused. I don't have an answer to that, frankly.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either, but there's a brilliant cartoon by The New Yorker where you see a guy on his lawn talking into his phone, asking ChatGPT, "ChatGPT, why is my electricity bill going up?" Mm-hmm. And in the back, you see this ginormous data center looming over the suburbs, and it is a big issue. It's a big issue, especially the hypocrisy of asking people to make so many efforts in their private lives and private consumption of electricity and water and everything, and then there's completely unrestricted access of these companies to these resources, the pouring of trillions of dollars into things that are going to deplete the planet even more. I think there's a big problem. That's why I think the solution is having more democratic debate about, okay, what do we want out of this technology besides enriching a few, people that are already very, very wealthy.
The problem with democratic debate is when people essentially operate in a sort of addiction mindset or situation, very often they understand that what they're doing might be bad for them, but they don't have the willpower and the capacity. That's the definition of addiction, to react. They want more and more of what keeps them and makes them feel happy in the very, very short term.
Yes, but they can decide together, collectively, democratically, through majority rule, etc., to tie their hands to the mast. Schools do that. We kind of like sort of the parents deciding for the children in that case, but you can decide as a society to tie your hands to the mast on some issues. We've done it on plastic bags. We've done it on ozone products. Maybe we can do it with AI. Have a healthy, sustainable use of AI products.
Since you mentioned the unfairness in the access of citizens to AI, do you think it enhances social inequalities, or it just reproduces the current ones?
Again, depending on the political structure, I think it right now it's on track to probably increase those inequalities between those who have access, who understand, who can use it. That said, there were very interesting results coming out of MIT recently showing that the people who benefit the most from having access to a chatbot in their work are the least educated, at least when it comes to the study is about people in a call center. And the least experienced, the least educated workers benefited the most, like their productivity increased by 34%. It was really remarkable, whereas the most experienced benefited not at all. And on average, it was something like 14%. pretty interesting. So this will lift the sort of bottom of the workforce up to the level of others in a much compressed amount of time. Other results show that it also, when you have something to help you write, you can compress the time that you need to write the thing you need to write, so by 40%, something like that, and the quality increases by 18%. So again, I mean, these are early results. I don't even really know what they mean truly, but this is interesting conceptually to think that, okay, maybe this can be used to actually lift people at the bottom.
But eventually, the capacity of these tools to do mechanical or repetitive jobs means that humans are no longer needed, which is good because we don't want humans to do jobs that are not really intellectually stimulating, but at the same time we need to find jobs or an occupation for people who are going to be displaced. So displacement is one issue. Another issue is there are, again, studies coming out of MIT very early, of course, but showing that people who rely very much on chatbots display a sort of reduction in their cognitive capacity. Mm-hmm. And then, the thing that is also, worrisome, but I also think it's a great opportunity, it is worrisome that essentially AI reproduces the common denominator, the average kind of opinion. And therefore, it is very, I think, unsuited for really breakthrough type of thinking. And that gives us the opportunity to, as humans, not to rely on chatbots in order to come up with new ideas. Because if you rely on chatbots, you are not going to come up very likely with new ideas. You are going to be repeating and moving in a sort of incremental
direction. I don't know if I believe that actually anymore. I think AI has advanced to a point where it can be creative. It goes beyond the data you input in it. It generates its own data. Actually, it learns. I mean, I'm not a full expert on this, but I do think it's at the point where it can generate music that is not something that's just a mashup of existing things, art. And even ideas. I mean, for me, the breakthrough on that front was when AlphaZero, there was this was a few years ago actually, that managed to generate a completely new technique at Go to win that had never been experienced. So maybe it's not completely new in the sense that it's defined by a parameter, a set of parameters. It's just exploring areas of the grid that humans had never done. But I mean, is novelty even in humans that different? We're just like advanced bees in some ways. So
we're going to move in very deep waters, but yeah. I'll make 2 points. The first one is that if AI is indeed as efficient in producing innovative thought and thinking, then it means that thinkers are going to be out of business.
Yes.
And artists are going to be out of business. And then we have to ask ourselves what kind of human society we have when people doing these kinds of things are no longer going to be able to operate. Or it is not going to be as effective, in which case, I mean, there's going to be still room for people to operate irrespective of it, but at the same time, the question is, are people's taste going to be affected by this kind of average type of taste that is going to be produced? And eventually also shaping preferences, taste, and things of that sort. And given the power of these companies and their ability to shape taste, the question is, what kind of direction are we moving? So these are questions for which you can imagine both sides of the answer. But again, the best thing we have to judge from the past is the internet. And so if you ask yourself, has the internet in the last 30 years or so really improved, lives and made political systems, behavior, individual relations, has it improved? Is the benefit net? We can see positives, we can see negatives. Overall, I'm not sure that the answer is that the benefit of the internet has been overall, clearly on one side.
So to wrap up, I would say neither a panakia, a great Greek word like the solution for every problem, nor a nuclear bomb, as some predicted, like the doomsday scenario supporters. I would like to wrap up with a strict personal question. How often do you use AI yourselves, and for what? Because I read a survey claiming that most people use it to like Google health problems, like my stomach aches, what do I have? Do I have cancer or something like that? Or love stories, like I'm dating this guy and he's not answering, what should I do? What do you use it for, Stathis?
Well, I don't have an AI girlfriend, but a lot of people do, actually, and that is becoming another kind of problem in which people don't interact with other humans at all. I don't use it.
At all?
No.
Wow.
I don't use it.
I use
Hélène?
it all the time. I use it for
Me too.
everything, like recipes, work, travel, health. I mean, absolutely everything. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So you can invite us back in 2 years and we'll compare notes on how we've done.
Who's happier?
So thank you very much for this thought-provoking debate, and thank you, the Forum, for having us.